They didn't choose to be a goalkeeper, the goal chose them. It was the kind of schoolyard afternoon where the sun burned the dirt into a hard crust, the grass came in uneven patches, and the wooden goalposts leaned ever so slightly, like they were tired of standing. A pair of worn-out gloves seams split, padding thin waited on the ground like an afterthought. He wasn't the fastest runner or the flashiest dribbler, and so, by the ancient law of playground selection, he was sent to the back. Stand there, try not to let it in. No one expected much. From the touchline, the coach watched with that half-smile that said, "We'll see if you last." At home, his parents thought it was just another childhood phase, like collecting marbles or drawing superheroes. But the boy felt it differently, as if the moment he stepped between those posts, the rest of the field drifted away and the game's weight settled on his shoulders. The first ball came at him faster than he'd imagined, a scuffed, heavy leather missile spinning through the air. He didn't think, didn't calculate, he just threw himself sideways. The impact thudded into his ribs, knocking the air out of him. The ball bounced harmlessly away. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then a roar from the other kids, the rush of footsteps, a slap on his back. He didn't score a goal, he stopped one. And somehow that felt like enough. From that day on, the net wasn't just a set of posts. It was his territory, his line in the dirt. The place where everything could fall apart in a second and where he was determined to stand. But that was only the beginning. Soon he would discover that goalkeeping wasn't just about blocking shots. It was about surviving the things no one else dared to face. From the sidelines, it looked effortless, a keeper standing tall, catching balls like it was nothing. But anyone watching him closely knew better. By now, he had learned to read the game, the way others read faces. The tilt of a striker's hips told him the story before the ball even left their boot. Eyes darting left but planting the foot to the right, he saw it. Positioning wasn't just about standing between two posts. It was about shrinking angles until there was nowhere left to shoot. The first real injuries came early. A ball smashed into his face hard enough to make the world spin. Studs raked down his thigh in a messy scramble for a loose ball. He tore skin on gravelly turf, diving for a save no one would remember. He learned to wear pain like part of the uniform. There were games where he was the reason the score stayed level, 3 saves in 3 minutes, each one sharper than the last, yet at the whistle. The crowd chanted someone else's name. That was the strange paradox of his job. Success meant being invisible. He began to notice the difference between his role and everyone else's. A forward could miss twice and still be a hero on the third try. A defender could misplace a pass and recover the next moment. But for a goalkeeper, one mistake was an obituary for the whole match. The ball didn't care if he'd been perfect for 89 minutes. That weight was the point. It forged him into something different, not louder, not faster, but sharper. And soon, the pressure would grow. High school football wasn't a game of chance anymore. It was a game where mistakes had a long memory. It ended with a save. 90 minutes gone, the scoreboard locked, and a striker bearing down with the kind of grin that says, "I've already scored in my head." The ball left his boot like a gunshot. The keeper's body moved before his mind could catch up. A full stretch, fingertips grazing leather just enough to tip it wide. The crowd roared. His teammates swarmed him. From the stands, it looked heroic. From the inside, it felt like exhaling after holding your breath for hours. But not every ending went that way. There was another match, another final minute, another shot. This time, half a step too slow. The ball rippled the net, and suddenly the air was heavy. No one cared that he'd been flawless the entire game until that moment. In the locker room afterward, sweat turned cold on his skin. He sat silent, replaying it over and over. Could he have read it sooner, moved earlier, jumped higher? In high school, the net was never empty. It was always crowded with expectation. Some teammates trusted him completely, adjusting their positions at a single shout. Others dismissed his voice entirely, leaving gaps in the back line that he could only patch with desperate dives. The pressure didn't vanish after the whistle. It followed him home. Some nights, he stayed awake, watching match footage until the clock bled into morning, chasing an answer that wouldn't come. And all this lived alongside another world: textbooks, exams, essays due on Monday. On the field, he was the last line of defense. Off it, he was just another student in a desk, trying to remember chemical formulas while his mind wandered back to the penalty box. High school was a forge. But the real test, the one that would decide whether he belonged, was still waiting in college. The announcement came just an hour before kickoff. The coach read the starting 11, his voice echoing off the locker room walls. The keeper's name never came. No one gasped. No one protested. This was college football. A place where nothing you'd done before mattered and where every position was up for grabs. Here, earning the starting spot wasn't about reputation. It was a trial by fire. Sprint tests timed to the fraction of a second, reaction drills with tennis balls hurled at point-blank range, jump measurements, and a brutal sequence of one-on-one scenarios against strikers hungry to humiliate you. All of it under the watchful eyes of the coaching staff, who scribbled silent notes but gave nothing away. And then there was the shadow on the other side of the training pitch, younger, taller, with an arm span that seemed to touch both goalposts at once. His reflexes snapped like mousetraps, swallowing shots that looked unstoppable. He wasn't just competition, he was the reminder that the clock was ticking. The schedule was relentless. Mornings began with long-distance runs, the kind that burned your lungs raw. Midday meant close-range reaction training, afternoons spent in tactical drills, evenings in cold tubs, followed by an hour in the video room studying opponents frame by frame, the way they shaped their bodies before a cross, the fraction of a second they dropped their head before a shot. And now, after all that, he sat on the bench in his tracksuit, watching another keeper stand where he believed he belonged. Every save that keeper made felt like a verdict. Every mistake sparked a flicker of hope. He didn't sulk. He didn't storm off. But inside, the resolve hardened. The net wasn't lost. Not yet. Because soon the game would step onto a bigger stage, one where the lights were brighter, the cameras sharper, and every mistake could follow you forever. It began with the roar. 50,000 voices crashing like waves against the tunnel walls as the players stepped into the light. The keeper could feel the vibration through his boots, the hum of expectation, the pulse of judgment. By the time the national anthem faded, he had already mapped out the pitch, the patches of turf worn thin, the way the wind bent crosses into the near post, the blind spots under the stadium lights. This was his territory now, though the boundaries were drawn in seconds and erased just as fast. Matchday routines had become rituals. Breakfast balanced between fuel and lightness. A warm-up so precise it bordered on superstition. The quiet moment in the tunnel before kickoff, where the only sound was the pounding of his own heartbeat. But perfection was fragile. In one match, a desperate lunge to block a low shot left his knee twisted under his own weight. Pain flared sharp, but so did the fear. Not of the injury itself, but of what it meant. The possibility that if he came off, someone else might take the net and never give it back. He waved away the physio, gritted his teeth, and stayed in. The outside world didn't see that. They saw only the scoreboard and the replays. In the professional game, media wasn't a backdrop. It was an opponent. One slip turned into a viral clip. Thousands of strangers dissected his form, his footwork, his worth. Commentators debated his decline before the final whistle had even blown. Yet for every storm, there were the moments that made it worth standing in the net. A derby match where he launched himself into the top corner, fingers just brushing the ball to claw it away from danger. A stoppage time one-on-one where he closed the gap in 3 furious strides and smothered the shot. Those saves became headlines, replayed in highlight reels, the kind of moments that whispered, "This is why you stayed." The difference between youth football and the professional game was like the difference between a spark and a wildfire. In youth leagues, mistakes were lessons. Here, they were verdicts. In youth leagues, the crowd was made up of family and friends. Here, it was strangers, ready to cheer you into a hero or bury you in a single breath. And still, the next match was coming. The lights would be just as bright, the crowd just as loud, and the margin for error just as thin. It ended without applause. The scoreboard read 1-0, the winning goal credited to a forward whose name the crowd chanted all the way out of the stadium. No one mentioned the keeper who had kept the scoreline alive for 90 long minutes, but his teammates knew. A few walked past and tapped his shoulder. One gave a brief nod. The kind of silent acknowledgement that said, "We saw what you did." That was enough. The years in goal had carved something into him that statistics couldn't measure. Patience, resilience, a willingness to live under pressure without trying to escape it. He had learned that the measure of a goalkeeper wasn't in the moments he stepped into the spotlight, but in the countless moments he stayed out of it. If it had to be put into words, it would sound like this. You don't need the spotlight. You just need to protect your goal. When the stands began to empty, he lingered. The net behind him sagged slightly from the night's work, the gloves on his hands streaked with mud. He took one long breath, eyes scanning the fading crowd, the floodlights painting the field in silver. Somewhere in the quiet, he understood. He would come back. Not for the cheers, not for the headlines, but for the simple, unshakable love of standing where no one else wants to stand.